We all hear about Swami performing miracles. He's done hundreds of them. But the biggest miracle that he performed has been when he transformed not merely people, he completely changes events. There have been several instances of this happening to several people. I was privileged to be part of one such event. At the time I was working in Europe with my previous employer, and we had a number of operations all over the world. One such operation was in a certain West African country. I don't want to mention the name of the country because some of the players I talk about here are still alive there. In fact, the president of the country, who was the president then, is back as president from early this year, so I don't want to mention the name of the country. In this country, as I was visiting, I used to visit this frequently, the local Sai association there decided to introduce the concept of EHV, Education in Human Values. So I invited Victor Kano, Victor Kano of Zambia School, to come and inaugurate the session. And I was given the job of inviting the wife of the president of the country to preside over the function. Because we thought, that's a good way of creating a PR in favor of the EHV, Education in Human Values. So I went to the wife of the president of the country and invited her. She listened to me patiently and said she will let me know through one of her assistants later whether she will accept it or not. So I came away. Next day, as I was driving to work, I found a big black Cadillac following me. And this was following me wherever I went. Later I learned from the government, somebody contact I had in the government, that there was a complaint lodged against me. Let me explain to you the background of that country. This country had three ethnic groups: Muslims, Christians, and the local people belonging to that region. Always conflict with each other. There are Muslims in the north, Christians in the south, and these other tribal people in the east. So very strong Islamic Christian tradition. And people must have thought my going and inviting the wife of the president of the country was something to do with installing an alien religion into that country. So they must have misunderstood. So there was a letter, a complaint. This country just got over civilian rule and there was a military dictatorship. So I went to the Indian ambassador and said, look, there is this complaint against me. I believe it's a criminal complaint. What do I do? The Indian ambassador there, who is currently also ambassador in one of the countries near India, said, you better leave the country. I've heard a lot of cases of people against whom complaint has been made, but they disappear. Execution without the trial was the order of the day in that particular country. So a lot of people have disappeared, a lot of people whom I knew. It was the worst kind of dictatorship during that period. But I didn't know what to do. My wife also said, let's leave the country. I said, you can't leave, you can't go away. I had a wife and child. How do you leave and everybody and go away? So my job next day was to introduce Victor Kano. That was my assignment. So as I went up the stage to introduce Victor Kano, I found sitting in the first row the same government people who were following me. So when I saw them sitting there, something in me broke. I said, okay. So instead of introducing Victor Kano, instead of talking about EHV, I talked about Swami. Who he was, where he was, how he was, etc., etc. And as I was talking, I could see people in the front row nodding their head. The case against him is complete. So I thought I have cooked my goose that day. I was going to be arrested. And once in that country, if you get arrested, you are not heard of at all. That was the situation background of that country. So I came back home. I told my wife, I expect to be picked up any time. Anyway, there's nothing we can do about it. We can't leave the country and run away. So I was sitting there waiting to be picked up. At about 9 o'clock, a friend of mine telephoned me. She said, are you watching the TV? I said, why? The TV in that country was government controlled, centrally controlled, etc., etc. She said, there's news about you there. I thought, you're going to be arrested, like a criminal going to be arrested, my photograph, because it was the function was being widely televised. But when I went there, I turned the TV on, complete surprise. My entire speech talking about Swami was being telecast. Not only the speech, there was a big introduction about Swami, who was an Eastern Messiah, and there was a lot of discussion about what he has founded, what he has created, etc. came on the TV. It was a complete surprise. A thing like this has never ever happened to that country. At a time when I was waiting to be arrested, this basically came. And the biggest surprise was next morning, I got an invitation from the president of the country and said, we read the TV report yesterday. We want to introduce EHV in our country. So I'm going to call a meeting of all the schools and all the parents. Would you be present at that and give a talk on what EHV is all about? So that function went on, and within 2 weeks, EHV became the officially accredited method of secondary school in that country. A country which had a violent religious conflict, a country where no alternate religion was ever accepted, and that happened. How did all this happen? He made that happen. Others could never have expected that something like that would have happened. And wonder of wonders, I went back to the chap who gave me information about the fact that there was a criminal complaint against me. I said, what happened to that complaint? So he went back to what is the equivalent of the local CID there. He went there, looked pages after page, page after page. That particular sheet of paper, all the complaint FIR had been written by hand in that notebook. In that particular notebook where he found my FIR, the complete paper was missing. He counted the page, every page stayed, nobody tore off that page, but that was completely missing. This is what Swami does. He completely changes the events. I think this is much more exciting than materialization, curing people, etc., etc. But as he himself not said, at my command, mountains rose. That day when this happened to me, I remember that quotation. Mountains rose, sea came, with one word I put everything at your command. That's what Swami said. These words were very relevant to what. While I was in US, till I came here, I used to come here for my annual pilgrimage to Prashanthanilayam. During one such pilgrimage, one day Mr. Chakravarti sent for me. I was a visitor from abroad, and said, Swami wants you to present the water project in Mexico. I said, I know nothing about the water project. Why should I, present it in Mexico? I know nothing about it. Then Chakravarti said, I don't know anything about it. You ask Swami. It was his instruction. So every day I used to go to darshan and wait for Swami to come so that I can tell him, Swami, I know nothing about water. One day Swami came near me. I got up and said, Swami, water. Swami immediately called the Sevadar and said, Isko pani de do. He thought I was asking for water. He was making fun like that. And I knew he had some motive at the back of his mind. So I spent a week here speaking to Kundalra, visiting all the sites. And about 1 week I had to learn all about water project, what it happened, etc., etc. It was a World Water Forum where they wanted me to present, Swami wanted me to present on the invitation to the United Nations, Anantapur Water Project. So there the water project was presented. It went well. But what is remarkable is more than, usually these are all conferences where, it's an official conference, nobody bothers about it. Like our own management conference, physics conference, chemistry conference, nothing happens after the conference. But for some peculiar reason, when I was making a presentation, the whole TV of that country was there in that room. So I was surprised, why are they here? After all, it's a project on water, normal water forum. For some reason, they were all there. At the end, you see, this is how Swami creates events where whatever he does gets publicized whenever he wants it, not when we choose it. He probably chose at that time, it's time that this is made public. So he chose that event to make that happen. So after it was all over, the local TV station, the biggest TV station in Mexico City, said, we want to interview you so that you can talk about the water project. So they started interviewing me, and all the time I got tired of talking about water project, so many cusecs of water, etc. I got tired of this. I wanted an excuse and opportunity to talk about Swami. But then I said, look, I can't talk about Swami. They want to know about the water project. How do I connect the two? How do I bring the two, etc., etc. So I was waiting for some opening where I could talk about Swami. I was dying to do that. Suddenly the TV interviewer asked me a question and said, you keep talking, because right through I couldn't talk Swami as Bhagavan, it's a new country, So I said the founder, the head of the trust, the founder, head of the trust. That's how I was describing Swami without mentioning the word Swami. Suddenly the interviewer asked me, you keep talking about founder, and who is this founder? Who was that person? Then I said, this is an opportunity for me to talk about Swami. But my whole question was, how do I talk about Swami in the matter of a few seconds? I said the best way to do that would be, usually whenever I go travel, my wife always keeps a picture of Swami in my pocket. So I remembered, I'm sure I have a picture of Swami in my pocket. So I put my hand in my suit pocket, took that picture out. This is the founder. And Swami is so photogenic, particularly in the TV and all those things. He became like a hero. All the TV station wanted his photograph, and all that. It was he created this opportunity again. So they were fascinated by Swami's photograph rather than his theory, and that's how the whole thing started. Then they started asking questions about Swami, and for about half an hour, 45 minutes, water project was forgotten. Swami, his message, where he was born, came. It was broadcast all over the country. It was probably the widest circulation it happened. I was so happy that this opportunity was given. But it didn't quite stop there. So as I was coming back home, flying back home to US from Mexico, I suddenly remembered one thing. When I left US to go to Mexico, I was at work. From work, I went directly. And it was for some reason at a meeting I was very late, so I could not go home and pack a bag. So what I did was, on the way, I had always a bag in my, this thing with some clothes, etc., etc. So on the way to the airport, I stopped at Macy's, picked up a suit, bought a suit, took the suit on, and I was putting that suit on for the TV event. How did a photograph come into that suit? My wife had no opportunity to put that photograph in that suit, right? And there it was. I put my hand in the pocket. Usually I have Swami's photograph. I took it out, a photograph came out. Now how did it come? This is what he makes things happen. He makes things appear when you most want it, at the least time you expect it. In fact, after that, I was waiting for Swami to tell me. He put the photograph in several interviews I had with him. I said, Swami, photographs. I used to talk about something, but you know what Swami is. If he doesn't want to tell you anything, he won't tell you anything. So he completely didn't even utter a word about it, but I know clearly what happened. Nobody can go to Macy's, a new suit that you buy, a photograph of Swami. I tried all kinds of thinking. Maybe that particular salesman is a Swami devotee. So I went and asked the salesman, do you know anything about Sathya Sai Baba? He said, I know who he is. I know nothing about it. So he made a photograph appear. That was again one of the greatest. He makes things happen when he wants it, at a time he wants it. That is what is remarkable about him. He was a great strategist as far as time is concerned. It will happen when the time comes. If the time comes, it will not happen. Both these events that I talks about Swami's classic instruction as a master of time.